EA Sports. Big.
This is gonna be very, very interesting.
Tricky came out for the PlayStation 2 a couple weeks back, and now it's here for the Gamecube. If you remember correctly, the original SSX was released with the launch of the PlayStation 2 last October, and it was met with a lot of critical acclaim, and a lot of people tagged it as the must-own game for the PlayStation 2 launch. And now, a year later, EA Sports Big, the redheaded stepchild of EA Sports, has come out with the pseudo-sequel to the game, and it's actually changed the gameplay drastically, so that it now plays a lot differently. The biggest change that you'll see in the gameplay is the addition of uber tricks. And what uber tricks are is that they're especially exaggerated tricks where the riders will actually pop their feet out of the bindings of the board and move independently of the board. And some of the tricks will be, one guy will do like windmills to a backspin while he's flying through the air on his board. There's another character who will lay flat on his board and will kind of spin like a torpedo. And they're definitely like the graphical highlight of the game, and they're pretty cool to watch. As far as getting the ability to do the uber tricks is concerned, there's a couple things you need to do to set them up first. The first thing you need to do is build up your adrenaline meter to the top, and that's done by landing tricks and not bailing. Once your adrenaline meter is all the way to the top, you'll hear a loop of Run DMC's It's Tricky play. And once that happens, then you know that you're good to go to perform some uber tricks. Uber tricks are pretty easy to pull off. It's pretty much just a 2-button combination, but you have to really line yourself up for the hits to get them to pull them off, so I can understand why they made them pretty easy to do. Once you land an uber trick, then you'll get one letter towards spelling the word tricky. Once you spell the entire word, then you have turbo for the entire race, and you can pretty much just dust the competition. So it's kind of cool in a way, because it definitely makes you look at the courses a lot differently than you did before when you played the original, because now you're instantly looking for that next hit so you can get that next letter in tricky, while trying to keep from bailing along the way so that your adrenaline meter doesn't drop too low and you don't have to start building it all up again. When I said SSX Tricky is a pseudo-sequel to the original SSX, what I meant was it's not a completely brand new game. There are 2 brand new courses in the game that weren't in the last game, and then there are 7 from the last game that are included as well. But it's kind of cool in that they really aren't anything like the originals at all. They use the same texture sets, so outwardly they may look the same, but once you start riding them you realize that there are tons more shortcuts, a lot more jumps, a lot more rails, and you really wouldn't be able to recognize the tracks in SSX Tricky when you think back to the older versions of the game. The PlayStation 2 version of SSX Tricky was an improvement over last year's game, but it wasn't drastic. If you remember correctly, if you ever played it, in last year's game there were some problems with the frame rates. It would slow down at times, especially in corners with a lot of riders, and the PlayStation 2 version of SSX Tricky has fixed this problem. But now we're talking about the Gamecube version of the game, and to be honest with you, it's pretty obvious that the game was a quick and dirty port. All the usual suspects from ports are present. The textures are a little more drab as far as colors are concerned. The frame rates definitely drag a lot of times in most of the courses, where you don't see that in the PlayStation 2 version. Also, some changes that have been made for the Gamecube version is the full motion video that plays after you finish a circuit. They've been compressed, so they're a little more grainy than they were on the PlayStation 2 version. There are some improvements, however, to the graphics, however slight. There is some more volumetric fogging in the Gamecube version of the game, and overall the special effects like particle effects and, like I said, fogging do look a little better. And I would also have to say that the edges on, on the characters and on the objects and the levels are a little smoother, so it looks like they actually may have implemented some anti-aliasing. But like I said before, the frame rates are kind of dodgy, so it's as far as like which version I would prefer, I'd probably have to go with the PlayStation 2 version where graphics are concerned. It's funny, EA Sports Big, when they first introduced SSX, the first time I played it, I think I fully realized just how the game was completely designed around the DualShock 2 controller. The thing that was cool about it is all the tricks are mapped to the 4 shoulder buttons. Well, EA Sports Big tried to do that with the Gamecube controller, but there's only 3 shoulder buttons. Well, this presents some kind of problems when you're trying to pull off tricks. One, you can't just do tricks the same way you did in SSX Tricky for the PS2 because there's only 3 buttons. So in order to replace the 1 button, you have to hold 2 of the buttons together. Another problem is the Z button that you have to press on the shoulder. The Z button itself is hard to push, so that's one problem. And another problem is pressing the Z button while keeping a finger on the R button. If you spend any time with the Gamecube controller, then you know how awkward it is to try to press both of them. And unfortunately, this is how the entire trick system in the game is used. So anyone who's played SSX Tricky for the PS2 is going to have, a little bit of an adjustment period but at the same time, it still plays predominantly well, and I still think it's a lot of fun to play, and I think most people will be able to get used to the controls eventually. If you own a Gamecube and you're looking for a snowboarding game, you really can't go wrong with SSX Tricky. While it's not as good as the PlayStation 2 version because of its dodgy frame rates and a control scheme that takes a little while to get used to, it's still a blast. And if you only have a Gamecube and you need a snowboarding game, then don't think twice about picking up SSX Tricky.